Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to session two of our Wednesday sessions. How are you? How did it go on Monday? Are you feeling all hunched up? Nice nods and smiles. Okay, everyone's in one piece still. Let us know if things start to come apart at the seams. It's early days, so hopefully everyone is okay. So again, in case I haven't met you yet, my name is Nancy Steele, and I'm just going to try to help us get through today's agenda, which is packed with quite a bit of stuff. So can you see this? Can you see my screen? So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the notion of jobs to be done, the job being the thing that the person who's at risk for the negative outcome is trying to do. Maybe it's before, maybe it's during. The negative outcome may occur while they're doing the job, but what is it that that person who's concerned with the work or the task, what are they really trying to accomplish, and why do they care about accomplishing it? So we're going to get into that, which is another way of looking at the who and the negative outcome, and we'll extend our thinking in that regard. We'll brainstorm about it. You'll have a chance to practice in a couple of scenarios, and then you'll also have a chance to apply it in your on your own hunches in breakout groups. After the break, we're going to talk about the problem definition, and we'll use everything we've done so far, and we'll go a little further and say, yeah, but the person who's trying to get that thing done and perhaps is at risk for a negative consequence or a negative outcome, that person already has options for how to get that job done. And so we'll dig into what are those options and approaches that are available today. Some of them may be on the horizon, and understand what the pros and cons are. And the purpose for doing that is that a really sort of recurrent theme you'll hear during the next 6 months is your ideas, when we eventually get to possible solutions, will need to be informed by what is already available, what's already out there, the gold standard, the standard of care, but what else is on the horizon. So we'll work on problem definitions a little bit, and you'll work on them a lot more during the intensification. So let's start with the milkshake video. I hope that you all had a chance to watch the 8-minute milkshake video with Clayton Christensen. And I'm just going to start with this question. For the commuters being described in that video, what's the job they're trying to get done? Anybody? I can't see your faces very well, so just jump up.
Something they could drink neatly in the car without destroying their work clothes, and that would fill them up until mid-morning.
I agree with Laura. Any other expansions or different takes on the job?
Had to fit well in the cup holder or in the hand. Had to have that extra hand sitting there, and bananas don't make it.
Mm-hmm. So the job has to do not only with what goes in the stomach and how it affects the frame of mind, but also where that object is, right? So there's a lot of sort of ergonomic considerations for the job. Any other thoughts? Thank you for that, Paul.
There was also a piece around it needing to be entertaining for a long commute. So kind of helping them pass time. They said it took something like 23 minutes to drink it. And it was a nice surprise when they got a little like piece of strawberry or something in there. So kind of like delighting them in the morning.
Mm-hmm. You've heard a lot about delighting the customer. So sometimes the job is one thing, but then once you become familiar with a solution or a possible approach, you find more possible jobs, right? I like being delighted during my commute. I like those little chunks of strawberries. So your idea of what an optimal job sort of broadens as a result of a solution. Thanks. Great. Natalie.
Presentation is just in PowerPoint, and you're sharing the desktop. It's not in play mode. So
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you wanted it to be.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about this. And sorry. Okay, well, I hope it's big enough, so I'm not going to change right now. So the reason the job to be done is important. Can you see it well enough for me to continue? Okay. The reason, here, wait, I can play right here. Okay. The reason the job is particularly important is often you'll find that the job doer will risk other things in order to get that job done. So in the snow blower, right, you need to get the sidewalk cleared, and it's so important. What will you risk as a result? Anyone?
They risk metabolic syndrome from so many milkshakes.
Okay, in the case of the milkshake, in the case of the snowblower, what is the job doer risking? But in her attempt to clear the sidewalk,
Their fingers.
Right. So it helps you understand not only what matters to the job doer, but also what's at stake for the job doer. And it also gives you really a reason to go deeper into the problem. The other thing that we want to encourage you to do is consider how the job to be done, when we look at the thing that the job doer wants to accomplish, helps better define the metrics. How would you measure improvement on that? How would you measure reduction in that negative outcome? It helps to take a look at that. And in writing, the form we'll use are these three things: the verb, the object, and a clarifier. So the verb might be commuting to work with something to eat or drink, while only using one hand. Commuting to work and feeling refreshed and awake and delighted, while only driving while having one hand free, while having one hand on the steering wheel, right? So there's a thing that's trying to be done. There's an object you're interacting with, and there's usually some clarifier associated with that. So let's brainstorm this a little bit with snowblower. So my colleague Anna is going to guide us a little bit here in plenary on a brainstorm on the job to be done for the person who's clearing this with a walkway.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nancy. I think I've met most of you last week, but I'm Anna Quadgrass. I work at Sloan in health systems, and we're obviously working on this. So please, let's think about the person using the snowblower. Why are they? What are they trying to achieve? What is the job that they want the snowblower, or what's the job they want to do when they happen to be using a snowblower in this case?
To clean the snow.
Let's go a little deeper. Obviously they want to clear the snow. Why?
Clear sidewalk, clear the driveway.
Do it quickly as well.
Quickly. Okay, so quickly would be one of the clarifiers, but so clear the snow from a walkway. So
with
go on.
no effort, because if you do with so you have a lot of more effort. So it's with no effort.
So low effort would be another part of the job. But what is the goal? What is the job? Easy is nice, but what is the job they're trying to make easy?
Moving snow from one place to another place.
Okay, but what is
They want it
but why are they moving the snow?
so that they can use their own driveway.
Okay, yeah. So they can use the driveway. They can. Why do they want to use the driveway?
For safety, to reduce liability.
Okay, so but that again, that's a qualifier. They want to safely use the driveway. They want to do it in a low liability way. But what do they want to use the driveway for? What's the job they're trying to do?
Move their car out.
Okay, yeah. So to move the car off the driveway, move themselves maybe?
Yeah. walk themselves out of the house.
So to travel outside of the house to go somewhere. In this, after it has snowed. Right? And you mentioned safely. And when do they need to do this? Like, do they need to do it in midsummer?
After a big snowstorm.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Because I mean, that's, you don't need a snow blower in midsummer, but the using of the snow blower, which is what they're trying to do, is because, and it sounds like what I've heard is they want to travel safely, in way, away from out of their house, on walkways or driveways after a snowstorm.
In
So now
some
you
places,
have-
they just want to, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
go ahead. Go ahead. No.
In some places, they just want to avoid the fine from the city.
Ah,
In
so that's
places where
another
that fine
job.
happens.
That's another job to be done for this, is avoid fines after a snowstorm.
And
that may be-
lawsuits.
Yeah, right. That goes along, right? Avoid punishment if you want to be very general. So one is travel safely. That's one job to be done. Another one, in some cases, is avoid fines and punishments. Okay.
I'll add one to that too, in case it might be like removing it to put the trash out, let's say, not going anywhere, but just clearing it up so they can put something out.
Well, that just still requires them to travel along their property to accomplish other tasks. So definitely. Okay, so currently, and this is a simple one, we have at least 2 jobs to be done by the person using a snowblower. Let's take 2 minutes and think about one of the other who cares. Let's think about the manufacturer. What is their job to be done? In the case, for somebody using snowblowers. What do they care about? And what do they need to have happen?
Make money, sell a lot of.
Okay, yeah. So sure, they very generally need to make money by selling snowblowers. But what else, especially when we're thinking here, we're looking at negative outcomes and why people care about that, because that's really,
Consumer safety and reputation.
Yeah. So what is their job to be done, with respect to this whole, to their manufacturing of snowblowers in this case?
Maybe you could say avoiding fines or lawsuits related to injury.
Sure. Yeah.
But also having an effective product.
So in fact, they want to have an effective product that doesn't injure the customers.
Correct.
And
so
one of the things that's starting to happen here is you identify various parts of the manufacturer's concerns as you're identifying the verb and object, but also some of the clarifiers. So sell, maybe 10% more snow blowers this year, or capture X, Y, Z more market share this year, snow blowers in the following markets to the following types of target customers, while managing risk, while managing, the risk of customers having injuries, right? So there's a balance implied in the job to be done. Sorry, Anna, did I?
No, that actually, that's a good point, is that the way you frame the exact job to be done can get more complex for some of the other players, but it is also useful to think about what their interests are. And, thinking about the job to be done is, again, one way to do it, because you're trying in the bigger picture, what we're trying to do when you're talking about a situation is really understand who's involved, who are, one of my friends says, who are the animals in the zoo? And, it's really who cares and why. And if we explain why by a job to be done, that's one way of doing it. So that's what we're really trying to achieve here.
So we'll do this just one more time together, looking at controlled substances. Hi, Laura. Controlled substances prescribed for pain by a medical professional. So we didn't go through and change the phrase unused opioids in all the slides, but that's what this particular situation is. The hunch being that when those unused opioids are left in the home, they present a risk to young people who could be tempted to either use them themselves, try them themselves, offer them to others, perhaps even sell them. So same thing, opening up to everybody here, faculty, fellows, everyone. Let's take the example of the negative outcome of addiction. So that's a really big downstream negative outcome. The who cares, let's say it's the parent or the adult that's living with teens in the home. Let's say it's adults living with teens in the home. Let's hear a job to be done, a verb, object, and clarifier from anybody. And I can't see you, I'm afraid.
Perhaps balance the necessity to have them with the potential risk of addiction and harm.
And say it one more time.
Balance the necessity to have them in the home versus the risk for potential harm.
So the job is to achieve a balance.
Right.
I'm not in the least bit am I judging. I'm just making sure we all understand. I like this. It's the idea the job is to achieve a balance of having them available, but not presenting risk to teens.
Right. And in some cases, the decision maybe it's not necessary to have them and don't.
Actually, you're rubbing up on a different thing now, which is the job to execute on an existing notion about whether we need to keep those pills in the house, or is the job also to understand what the risk might be? So that's an interesting question. And actually, if we were working on this project together, and by the way, there is a team working on it, that would be an interesting question that we would have to grapple with. Like, is the job more about understanding the risk and managing the behavior of others and myself, or is it also about just continuing in my current pattern, which is to hold on to them but lock them up somewhere, which would be one approach. Let's keep going. Other people in the room, what's a job to be done for the parent?
Maybe just avoid at all using unused opioids at home.
Avoid, say it again, avoid anyone using them?
Avoid having unused opioids at home. Like if extra were prescribed or
And do they care about having, let's keep going. So that one of the reasons, by the way, I should have said this in the beginning, that's really fruitful. And we all experience this as fruitful, by the way. It has nothing to do with, how long you've been doing this. It's amazing how many times you get kind of knocked up with some assumptions that you realize you had. So are they motivated to dispose of the unused opioids? Because that job implies they are motivated. Do they care about disposing of them? It's a question.
I think they care about their kids not taking excess opioids. So it doesn't matter where they're stored, just that they aren't taken by accident or unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You could almost reframe it as controlling the presence of opioids in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone's going to have pain medication from a surgery or something, so they have to be able to control it, and they may not want to have it, but they have to have it for whatever conditions. So the control of the presence of the narcotic, I think, is a job that needs to be done.
It's an interesting challenge if we use a word like control, right? Because you could control by throwing them all away. Was that Paul? It sounded like Paul.
Yes, it was.
Okay, you could control by not filling the script in the first place. You could control by, I'm going to be, cute here, having your kids basically move out during the time that you have any opioid. I mean, so you could control any number of ways, right? So let's keep going. It's great. It's great. Anyone else? And by the way, you don't have to build on each other's here. It could be a fresh notion of what you think that adult's job might be.
I might chime in there. For the verb object clarifier thing, I'm thinking verb be educating. I don't know if child is the object in this case, but educating the child about the negative consequences of using it.
So that's so interesting, right? So now the job could even shift to being not about the pills, but about the people in the home. Totally different job, right? Fascinating. And the reason we spend so much time on this is that often and I'm sure you've experienced this in your own work. If somebody says, I have an app for that, I have a solution for that, and apps currently being the most popular way to express the solution often, it's often kind of implied that education will change behavior. In fact, there isn't a lot of data in some diseases where it turns out that education or knowledge about the disease changes behavior. But it may be a choice that you make as a solution developer eventually, many months from now, to get into that field. But you would want to do it consciously, that you really believe there's a lever to be pulled by changing the knowledge level, and that would lead to a change. It would actuate some change in behavior, which would then actuate some change in the negative outcome. But you have to believe in that logic chain to go down the path of education. Let's get, because we're going to run short on time. Let's get one more faculty welcome. And we'll go to, frankly, sorry, we'll go to policymakers who would be concerned about the burden on the healthcare system of what astoundingly is still a rise in the incidence rates of new opioid addiction cases, the need for addiction treatment centers, the costs associated with that, also just controlling the market for illegal substances. So a lot of concerns in that little box there. Anyone want to give a pass at the job to be done for a policymaker, let's say at the state level?
I guess I'm sorry. I can go in. So I guess come up with a public policy that prevents this misuse of unused opioids.
Okay, so here I've written a policy. Here it is. Here it is. I'm going to send it out. What's the job I was trying to get done by sending that out?
Making ease of disposal.
Say it again.
You'd want to create a community environment where unused pills could be disposed of safely.
So a policy that leads to, I'm making this up, a series of practices that maybe give more disposal options in the community. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of? Maybe funding associated with that, and maybe incentives associated with that.
And rules and regulations, like having, so that people, when they dispose of them, aren't questioned by cops or police, you know, so that it's safe and anonymous. People feel comfortable with that. I also wanted to point out that there are communities for whom they never get unused opioids, you know, that this is a problem that relates to certain communities who get too many opioid pills, but there are certain communities that need, you know, who have pain after surgery, who don't get appropriate pain control. So there's also a flip to having too much tight regulation of these things. But
is that Emily?
Yes.
Oh, so actually that's an excellent segue to something we're going to do after the break, which is we're going to get into problem definition, which will include looking at things like, well, wait, you know, if I'm defining the problem in enough narrow enough, I should be able to explain why it's happening place A versus place B.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what Emily was just kind of raising up, which is this observable negative outcome may be happening in certain localities. What can we know about the problem by virtue of it not happening in all localities. So that becomes a helpful way of better defining the problem. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, we'll move on. Okay, whoops. Okay, we're gonna go into some breakout groups now. It's 10:30 and we're gonna have 50 minutes to apply this to the hunches that you've been working on. Now, I know that you prepared for today and we thank you for doing this and not a lot of time. Each of you prepared 2 hunches, but during this breakout room, you'll just pick your favorite. Each fellow will pick 1 hunch that they want to subject to this kind of format, right? So you already have the who cares and why. We're going to start though with the negative outcome, like what goes wrong, not theoretically, but actually what goes wrong. Who is impacted by that negative outcome? So we're doing it in this order, right? Who is impacted? It may be more than one entity, and why do they care about that negative outcome? And then, and you'll be typing, or there'll be someone in your breakout room who offers to type for you. And then using this verb object clarifier. So again, verb, feel awake while commuting, object, in my car, clarifier, well, having at least one hand available to be on the wheel. Okay, Melissa, can I stop sharing?
So thank you for all the work that you did on Miro. I created a board for workshop W2, today being W2. It contains all of the hunches that were present as of 7:30 or 8 o'clock this morning. So if there is a hunch that you did between 7:30 and 9:30 that is not on the board that you would like to have in the workshop, please copy the sticky and paste it here. This board does have the breakout room assignments and then one sort of column for each of those breakout rooms. Excuse me. I sorted the stickies to the best of my ability according to the breakout room in which the fellows were assigned, and the anonymous ones are here at the bottom. This is the table that you can use for the process. The scribes in faculty know that it's pretty easy to duplicate a column, a table using the 3 dots. You can just duplicate and continue. It's also very easy to make the table have more rows the same way you do in Word by just hitting tab at the end of the row.
Would you suggest that we switch to the Miro platform for this part, or?
I do, because your work product is here and you can continue to document your progress on the Miro board. We'll continue coming back to Miro for quite a while during the process here. So I hope everyone's getting comfortable with it. This short little logistics tutorial is meant to help that along. Are there any other questions? I have assigned the breakout rooms. I will let you know every 10 minutes because the original idea was that there would be 5 fellows per room. You each have 1 hunch to discuss. I understand that some rooms now have 4 people in it, so you'll have, roughly 12 minutes. So this will go for 50 minutes. And the breakout rooms are ready to open unless you have questions. Oh, I didn't hit enter on the chat so that you have the link to this frame. Any questions? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Melissa, for moving us around and doing all these other logistics to enable us to have these conversations. So this next session, this next section here really is looking at what happened in the breakout rooms and what have we learned what are some questions that came up? So what I'd like to ask first is if anyone from any breakout room would like to volunteer a a hunch that was discussed that seemed, where you guys made good progress, where it felt really comfortable or relatively simple to come up with some job to be done for that situation. Does anybody any fellow or faculty want to volunteer a hunch that was in your breakout room? That
I think Paul's wound pressure was easier, probably.
talk a little bit about what you heard and why you think it was pretty straightforward.
I think the hunch was well defined, which was, the creation of wounds, of pressure wounds in patients who are bedridden, for a long time. And we needed to find a solution for it.
Okay. And what was one of the, jobs to be done related to that hunch that came out?
Yeah, the need to constantly move the patient, but I think it was interesting, the discussion of differentiating how he's doing now, what we do now, and then think differently on what needs to be done. And Javier added that we need to prevent the appearance of those wounds, which can be done also by moving the patient around, but it's like we have to think beyond what is already done right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know what else. Paul, help.
No, I agree. I think the initial hunch was very focused on, I guess with my life and my experience, and with Javier, he kind of made me take a step back and go, okay, well, that's the problem. That's not always a solution the way you're going with it. And you got to take a step back and look at it from a different view, and then find other parallels that before the problem occurs, so to speak, as opposed to just going, this is the problem. This is what you do. How do we do this? How do we fix it? And not take a step back and going, hold on a second, that's the problem, but why'd you get there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I could just build on that, just taking together what Lena and Paul said. So one of the interesting things is if you think about the sort of sequence of events, right, from a wound where at the end of that sequence of events, there's a number of unmanaged wounds for a patient that has to be moved and rotated frequently. And then you think it's sort of the beginning of all that sequence of events, right, before there are any pressure wounds at all. And I think one of the things that came up in this conversation is, where does it make sense to address, which along that sequence, there are many problems, there are many issues that arise. And where does it make the most sense to hone in? Is it accepting the protocol that already exists for moving patients and figuring out how to make that more doable? That's way down at that end of the sequence. Or is it much earlier on before the wound appears? So that's really good, I think, really good thinking. And the jobs we've done, I feel can help because we saw you guys talking about that.
Yeah. And so what I, and I was in the same room. And so what I did notice is that it was in some ways a fairly easy to understand issue then that allowed folks to explore what was sort of the proximate thing, as well as take a step back. And that's really similar to the milkshake. Yeah, it's not just to fill you up. There's other things that need to happen. There's other processes or other things that need to get done for the patient or for the nurse or for others. So this is just a good general learning that even a simple thing that seems fairly clear, there's more richness to it. So yeah, what are some other hunches and jobs to be done analyses in the other rooms that seem to we felt like, okay, yeah, we made some progress here, and describe that a little bit. Okay, so they were not really easy, is what I'm gathering. and that actually is also not surprising. It sounds deceptively simple, this particular framework, or many other frameworks, but as soon as you get into it, you start figuring out all kinds of interesting things and having these conversations. So maybe let me ask, is there a hunch that you worked on in any of the rooms where you felt like you had to take a detour, and what was going on?
Yeah, I could talk about one of the hunches in our room. It was my hunch. We talked about long-term hospital patients who often experience chronic loneliness and social isolation. And sort of the problem being that much of the burden to motivate or sort of socialize or engage with those patients falls on healthcare workers or caregivers who don't have the time or energy to address it. And the problem or the who that we sort of focused on and the negative outcome was, healthcare workers who ultimately oftentimes end up experiencing burnout from, feeling the pressure of not only having to do their, physician or nursing duties, but also provide that emotional support, and can often feel strained on time being able to do that. But when we started thinking about those jobs to be done, we kind of started to think, well, maybe the job needs to be done is training them to be able to better emotionally support, or maybe the job to be done is find them other people or support that can do those things, which sort of kind of I felt was moving into like a solution mindset or like solutioning of the problem rather than, currently what their job is, which ultimately is, providing their patient care. And I think we started also kind of going in circles around who is the real who that we're talking about here. Is it doctors? Is it nurses? Is it the patient? Because there could be multiple, who's associated with some of these negative outcomes. Is it the larger hospital system or hospital management? So yeah, I don't know if anyone else from our group wants to chime in, but we ended up with one, which is good. But I did think it was a little bit more of a challenging conversation in a good way. But
I think that was really well said, Natalie. I think that and Daniel can chime in here too, he was scribing, so and then we thank him for that, and he kind of kept us on task because we would swap back and forward between the who, and then we get confused about the negative outcome, and so kind of going through that and then finally coming up with a kind of something that made logical sense was not linear, and there was a lot of going back and forward, and that can sometimes be frustrating for certain.
Yeah, so personally, if I may add, I found very difficult to start with the who is not the directly affected person. So we just skipped the patient and we went to the health worker, and that was really hard. I think we actually came back to, is this really the who, and started to, it was a little confusing. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are people getting increasingly comfortable with moving back and forth, right? So you start with a negative outcome, you think about who's affected, you think about the job they're trying to go, well, actually the negative outcome I want to focus on is this, and that maybe iterates you back to a different who. I mean, so just to reinforce, we certainly encourage that iteration. You may go a number of times. You may decide that you want to focus on babies who are less than 400 grams, to take an example we were just talking about. And then as you craft the problem further and get more specific, you realize, this actually is particularly a problem for babies that are even heavier than that, right? So, narrowing down can also help you decide which specific problem for whom you want to work on, even if you end up broadening later.
Yeah, and the other point that I was noticing too is that one of the examples we started with neurodegenerative diseases. And that was actually, that whole topic area was way too broad to think about who is affected and what their jobs are. So to narrow it down, even within sort of the hunch area, to a more specific disease to a more specific type of patient, if you're thinking about specific types of who's within that sort of topic, and then even sometimes focusing on more specific negative outcomes until you can get to something where you can actually define clearly what is a job that must be done, and thinking about that. So yes, you're always, I want to just reinforce Nancy, all of these, you know, these techniques and these processes. I mean, it sounded so easy when we heard about the milkshake, but figuring out what the story is that you are going to tell about this, what is the job to be done, who's doing it, who is affected, what are the outcomes, is actually pretty complex. And you end up finding yourself often enough dealing with any one of these areas to make it more specific, to make it, to really understand what is going on there. And sometimes you'll end up having to ask experts, and sometimes you have the experts in the room, and sometimes it may not require an expert because it's something that affects many of us.
Well, that's well said. I have a quick suggestion, Anna, which is that we get one more hunch and then we maybe take our break a little earlier than planned. Someone who is inspired to read out loud their revised negative outcome, who, job to be done. Anyone who hasn't offered something up yet? Okay, faculty, did you hear one that you want to?
Well, I'll just comment that in the breakout room I was in, one of the who's turned out not to be a living being, right? It turned out to be an incubator. So in the jobs to be done formulation, we were asking, what's the job that the neonatal incubator has to do, and what are the problems that it's trying to solve currently? And so now that we're in a world where machines can do jobs, we can start expanding the who a little bit through that lens as well. So I thought that was interesting, and that I don't think we'd ever run across that when doing jobs to be done before, but I thought I'd just call it out.
I think, just to add to that, that was my hunch. I think that also leads me to better define the hunch, because the hunch was too broad and it had like different problems in it. But as we discussed, I could figure, actually you have to focus, or we have to focus on the incubator and the size of the babies and what is the job that the incubator does with these premature babies. So I will rewrite it and work it better based on that discussion.
I'm a little confused, but the milkshake had a job to be done, right?
Well, the milkshake was the thing that did a job for the person who bought it.
Okay.
The milkshake was the instrument that did the person's job. In this case, and because I was in the same room, the incubator actually had a job to do for the baby and for others. So you want to be, I think the suggestion would be to really think through that question that you're asking is who is doing the job for whom? Or what is doing the job for whom? I think is then an important question.
But Laura, right? And I think that's where Lena sort of started with her hunch was that the physician or the baby was hiring the incubator to do the job, just like the commuter was hiring the milkshake to do the job. But as you started thinking about, well, okay, they've already hired the incubator, why doesn't that work? And so then you get into, at some level that marketing research was trying to figure out, why is the milkshake not doing the job of, it's doing the calorie thing, but it's not doing the job that the person wants. So in this case, we need to understand what the baby wants to make the incubators work better, essentially, to keep that same. So you're right. maybe I just never really thought of the milkshake in that way, the way we were thinking the incubator, but I think Lori, you're right, that the milkshake and the incubator are sort of equivalent in this. And we need to redesign the milkshake or redesign the incubator to be more effective at doing the job.
But it's not either or, it's both, right? So, you know, what I guess accomplished market researchers do is they start with the person who's commuting, and then over time they move to realizing, the job of the milkshake could maybe be an opportunity here if it were to be transformed, right? So you could start with the job of the commuter and move to the job of the milkshake, right? So anyone else who we haven't heard from? Danielle, anyone have stuff on their mind here about a hunch that they worked on, they want to read it? Otherwise,
if no one does, I just want to highlight something that I think Ben said very well in our room, so he can fix it after I try to restate it. And somebody mentioned it here, but I think it's worth calling out that, you know, when we focus this is different from the incubator example, but when we focus on the patient, the person experiencing, you know, the medical bad outcome, for example, and then we want to consider the provider, very often we go to the provider wanting to prevent the bad outcome for that person, and that can get in the way. And it's, well, emotionally we want as a provider, of course, we want the best, right? But as a practical matter, that's not exactly our job, or it's a different set of jobs. There's a whole other set that's not directly related to the making the patient outcome improve, right? Directly. You might have pressures, malpractice came up, you know, measures of hospital quality of care, for example. So if you find yourself focusing on providers, then really try to think about the things that are not directly overlapping what the patient or the person they're caregiving for experience. And Ben, you want to say it better?
No.
Or if I messed it up.
Perfect.
And if you don't, then you're likely to come up short, because ultimately what feels good is probably not going to have the same kind of traction of what, you know, the day-to-day pressures actually turn out to be that govern your decision making as the provider. Ideal self versus real self.
And there's the in the moment job to be done, plus the, you know, the bigger scope of your job that, you know, your boss wants you to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know we didn't hear from everyone. That's fine. That's fine. You're going to have time next week to take these, dust them off, and evolve them into what we call problem definitions. So that's going to be exciting. So if it's okay with you, Anna and Melissa, we could take our break now and make it from 11:44 to 12:44.
No,
I mean,
no.
11:54.
I would, yeah, 11:54. I prefer to keep it at 10 minutes and then we get the time.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So we'll come back at 5 or 6 minutes before 12 Eastern time. And hopefully that fits with your bio break or your phone call or whatever you need to do. See you in 10 minutes.